Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their life and their journey throughout the world of martial arts and other stuff they're involved in. My guest today got involved with the sport of fencing in 1984 at the age of 34 and has participated as a competitor, instructor, and organizer. Over a decade, he competed in numerous local and national competitions. He served as a chair, secretary, and treasurer of the Central Florida Division of the U.S. Fencing Association at different times throughout his 40-year career. In 1989, he assisted the Junior Olympics in Orlando, and in 1990, assisted the National Championships in Orlando. He's been teaching and coaching for 30 years and has coached some of Florida's top fencers. In 2016, he became involved in the United States Fencing Association Para-Fencing program, and in 2019, he traveled to South Korea with the U.S. team for the World Para-Fencing Championships. Terry Hayes, as para-fencer, represented the U.S. in the Paralympics in Tokyo. Please welcome my guest today, Mr. Charles Johnson. How are you doing today, sir? I'm doing great, Brian. Thanks for inviting me to be here. I really appreciate it. Hey, thank you. I do truly appreciate it. And you're my first actual fencer. I've had a few guests that have dabbled in fencing and done some a bit, but you're my first true 100% fencer I've had on the show. So I'm excited to hear your story and learn more about you. Well, I've been doing it for a long time, like you said, 40 years of experience here. Nice. And there really is a crossover between conventional martial arts or Asian martial arts and European martial arts. Mm-hmm. There's some, I'm sure you're familiar with Mr. Bruce Lee. Oh, yeah. Bruce Lee was actually a fencer. Yes. He learned to fence from his brother, and he was very much involved in martial arts, and in his style, Jeet Kune Do. Jeet Kune Do. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. At any rate, he used a lot of fencing moves in that style. That is correct. Well, so I mentioned you've been fencing for 40 years. My first question is, before fencing, was there ever any interest or involvement in any other kind of like traditional martial arts? Or did you do wrestling, boxing, any kind of karate or any of that, or any interest in that kind of thing when you were younger? Yeah, I did a bit of kung fu for a little while, for about a year. Okay. My wife and I did it together. A friend of ours was teaching us. And when it got to the point where my wife could take my head off with a roundhouse kick, I decided it was time for me to retire from that sport. Probably a wise choice. So in that year, did you do any competition in Kung Fu or pretty much just the training? I've never competed in karate at all. Okay, that's cool. So what led you to fencing? Kind of walk us through that time in your life, kind of what drew you to it and how'd you get involved? Well, I always had an interest in it. When I was a little boy, we only had, used to years ago, you only got two channels. That was a CBS and NBC. Yep. And on Sundays, they would run all sorts of fillers because there was no real good, solid programming back then. And I remember sitting in my overstuffed chair at my grandmother's one Sunday afternoon watching TV, and suddenly this thing come on about fencing. And I was just fascinated with it. And ever since then, I wanted to do it. But I grew up, and I must have been 10 years old. Mm-hmm. But growing up in eastern North Carolina in the literal boondocks, I mean, I lived in the woods down on the coast near Cape Hatteras. And, the fencing was to keep the horses in, the cattle. There was no regular fencing, Yep. So I had to wait for years. But when I moved to Fort Myers, a friend of mine who had been living in Atlanta had fenced up there, and he moved here, and he wanted to keep fencing, and he looked around, and he found that we actually had a fencing club here in Fort Myers. It was very small. It was run out of the rec center here, and so he got me involved in it, and I took to it like a fish to water. I just absolutely loved it, and I've been doing it ever since. So now you said 34 years old. So when you joined that class, were you both kind of the older members in the class? Was there quite a mixture? I think John was younger than me. I think John was probably in his 30s, but he'd already been fencing in Atlanta. Okay. But yeah, that was new for me. And I was in there with a bunch of younger teenagers.
there were some guys that were probably in their 20s, but, I was the oldest one. I've always been the old man of fencing.
Once obviously you said something that you had an interest in since about 10 years old, something you always wanted to do. You finally got there. Once you got into it, what was it about it? What drew you in? What made you want to keep going?
That's a good question. The competition.
Really?
I've always been a bit competitive. My wife and I ran our own business for years. And the idea of competing in it, I never got to a really high level, although I did reasonably well in Veterans Nationals when I was older. When I was in my 40s, I fenced a couple of vets national championships and, ended up in like 4th place in FA one year, 4th place in foil one year. And, but I never got the gold medal. Mm-hmm. But it was just, the idea of competing against it. I was happy fencing, even if I lost. If I felt like I had fenced my best, I was happy with the results.
Okay.
Yeah, so, nobody likes losing, but I always tried to take it with a grain of salt. And if I learned something from the competition, even if I lost, I felt like I'd really won because I learned something new.
Okay. Walk us through the competition. Because even myself, I've never been to one in person. I've watched a few on TV, but I don't truly understand the sport. So just walk us through a little bit, what it takes during an actual competition, how you score points, what it takes to win.
Well, there's actually 3 weapons.
Okay.
And there's foil, epee, and saber.
Okay.
And foil, you have a target area from the upper torso is the entire front and back, excluding the arms and the head. So you can only make a touch on actually the area where the sport's based on the duel. And when people were dueling for real, they were taught by a maestro, and the idea was to hit those areas where the vital organs were. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of brutal. Yeah. People were dueling back then to actually try to kill each other. Now we do it for sport, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, so that's your target area for foil. Epee, which actually, epee, you've probably seen this in a million crossword puzzles, EPEE, was actually the last real dueling weapon. They were still dueling with that weapon up into the 1920s. And it's not changed a lot other than the point's been ground off of it. Mm-hmm. And a button put on it, a little rubber tip or an electric button in our case, to score and not injure anybody.
Right.
And then there's saber, which is based on the cavalry saber, which came popular in the Napoleonic era. And the saber, epee, whole body's target, saber, the upper torso, including the arms and head, are the target area.
Okay.
So the scoring's a little different from one to the other, but not extremely different. Your competitions are usually done with pools of 5 to 7 people per pool for seeding purposes. So you want to seed really high because then you go to a direct elimination, and it's very similar to what they do in tennis. There's a tree, and so top's going to fence bottom.
Okay.
And you don't want to be the guy on the bottom fencing the guy on the top because you just spent several $1,000s to travel halfway across the country. You fenced 6 bouts if it was a 7-man pool. And then you get knocked out by the top guy in one round and you go home. So, it can be frustrating, but ideally you'll keep moving up through that tree until you get to the gold medal round. The pool bouts are fenced 5 touches, 3 minutes.
Okay.
And then the direct elimination bouts are fenced 15 touches, 3-minute period, 1-minute rest. Second period of 3 minutes, a 1-minute rest, and then a final third period.
Wow.
So yeah, they're pretty long. You get that 1-minute rest. During the pool bouts, the coaches are not supposed to be talking to their fencer while he's on the strip. Although you see coaches doing that all the time, and I think that's kind of great because it distracts their fencer and gives my fencer a better opportunity to score.
Nice. But
in the direct elimination bouts, on those 1-minute breaks, the coach is allowed to approach his fencer and they'll discuss what's going on. And, is your strategy working? Do you need to change it? What are your tactics you're using? Do you need to change some of your tactics? You got 1 minute, so, you as a coach, it has to be pretty brief what you tell them. And you don't want to overload them anyway.
Yeah.
You don't want to give them too much to think about. They'll go back out on the strip and they're trying to remember what the coach said and they get hit. So keep it simple.
So can they see the score while they're competing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, usually at national championships or international championships, the scoring equipment will have a timer on it so they can see the time, and it'll have the score one side for each side for each opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have red and green lights on the scoring boxes. It's electric, so you're hooked up to this long reel that has it's like a dog run almost.
Mm-hmm.
And the wire runs out your body and out your arm and plugs into your weapon. The weapon has a wire running down through it to the tip in the case of point weapons. So it gets a little complex. Point weapons are epee and foil. Saber is basically a cutting weapon.
Okay.
You can score with a point on saber, but usually you hit with the edge of the blade, and that actually grounds out the box and makes the light go off. So you got a red light for one guy, green light for another. In the case of foil, you have off targets because, like I said earlier, the upper torso is the only target area.
Mm-hmm.
So if it hits the legs or the head or the hand, a white light will go off. It'll indicate an off target. The director will call a halt. You'll start again from where that halt occurred. There's on-guard lines on the strip. The strip is about 2 meters, about 6 feet wide, I think. And it's about 70 feet long, 72 feet long, I think, something like that. And you have on-guard lines, one fencer on one side, one fencer on the other. They face each other, and the director will stay on guard, ready, and then fence. And then they, go at it until somebody scores or gets off target.
Okay.
In saber, trying to think, because I don't coach saber. Okay. I teach people basics in saber, and then I turn it over to somebody who understands the strategy and tactics a little better than me. In saber, there are no off targets, and the bouts are not timed in saber because saber is very, very fast.
Okay.
It's very fast, and so they don't even put a timer on it. If a saber bout lasted 3 minutes, I'd be surprised.
Wow.
Usually a minute and a half, it's over.
Okay.
They've reached the 5 touches in a pool bout, or they've gone through the first. Now, in the trying to remember how they actually do the saber in the direct eliminations. I haven't seen a saber bout in a long time.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure how they do the direct eliminations in the saber. I'm pretty sure it's still. Oh yeah. It's the first person to score 10, then they break.
Okay.
And then because there's no off targets and they don't time it in saber because it is quick. When the score reaches 10, they take a 1 minute break. I'm pretty sure that's how it goes. And in FA, it's just like foil. It's just, 3 minute, 1 minute rest, 3 minute, 1 minute rest, and the final of 3 minutes.
Kind of answered my own question because I was kind of curious. Do most people do all three, or do usually does a fencer pick the one they like the best and stick with it?
There are some fencers who do all 3 weapons. Now,
wow.
Terry Hayes, my para-Olympian,
mm-hmm.
she did all 3 weapons, which is very unusual. And she picked them up very quickly because she started in 2016, I believe.
Okay.
And she went to the 2020 Olympics, which was actually in 2021 because of COVID. But she fenced all 3 weapons, and that's really what gave her the edge to make the U.S. team was that ability to fence all 3 weapons.
Okay.
But it's unusual. Most of the time people, like when I was competing, I would do point weapons. I would do foil and epee.
Okay.
I never competed in saber. And people who do saber generally, because of the difference in it, the point weapons, you're hitting with the very tip of the weapon. You can't score with the edge.
Yeah.
Saber, you're hitting with the edge or the point. So it's a completely different style of fencing. And it doesn't translate necessarily well from one to the other. You have to really, if you're going to move from one weapon to another, from a point weapon to the edge weapon, the saber, then you really have to focus on the fact that now I'm fencing saber. And so my strategy, my tactics, everything has to be a bit different than what it would have been for my point weapon.
Okay.
And that's hard for people to do sometimes.
Yeah. So for foil and epee, did you have a favorite out of the 2?
I loved foil, but I was better at epee.
Okay.
Well, with epee, there are really very limited rules.
Mm-hmm.
With epee, as long as you stay on the strip, if you both hit at the same time, you both get awarded a point. It's called a double touch. If you get ahead, you can kind of sit back and wait for your opponent to come, hoping they'll make a mistake and you can score. I was just really better at strategy and tactics with epee than I was at foil.
Okay.
I loved foil because in epee, the director really cannot rob you of points.
Mm-hmm.
In foil, if you get a bad director, the guy, he's like the referee in a wrestling match or a boxing match. So he tells you when to start, when to stop, and he awards the points. And in foil, there's a little something called right of way, which is it confuses the heck out of most people. because the person who attacks, the person who initiates the attack first has right of way. The person who's being obligated is obligated to defend against that attack. I mean, if you were in a real duel, because remember, this sport's based on dueling. If you both attacked each other at the same time, you both would probably get either wounded or you both would die.
Yeah.
So having that in mind, if I'm attacked, I have to defend with what's called a parry. And that's very much like a block in karate.
Mm-hmm.
I can't use my backhand, my left hand. I'm going to lead with my dominant leg, which would be, for me, would be right-handed front leg. And so my backhand has to be back. I cannot come forward with that hand to cover target. If I do, I'm going to get a penalty card. And so I have to fence in a manner that not only try to score on my opponent, but try to make my actions clear enough to the director that the director will understand what it is I'm doing and make the call. If I think I got the touch, I want the director to think I got the touch. Wow. And that, so if I attack and they go to parry or block my blade, I'm going to do what's called a disengage. I'm going to come around their bell guard and will make them miss the block so that I can continue my attack and score.
Nice.
If they get the parry, and then they're going to repost. They're going to parry, and then they're going to try to hit me. And now they have the right of way because they made a successful parry. I have to get back and try to defend. So there's usually a lot of back and forth until somebody actually scores. And it's fast, and it's really hard to follow if you're not familiar with it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's why I'm glad you're explaining this, because like I said, I've tried watching it a few times, and I didn't understand it. But this is going to help. I think I'm going to enjoy it next time I watch it.
Yeah, if you understand in foil, and saber has right of way just like foil does. The right of way is very similar. In foil, there's a bit of latitude. In Bruce Lee's style of karate, when he lunges, that's exactly the lunge we do. And he's coming out, he's pushing off his back foot, extending with that hand. And in his case, he's using his fist to make the touch.
Yep.
And we're using our blade to make the touch.
Nice.
So, pretty much it in a nutshell.
Okay.
FA is great because there's no right of way. The director can't rob you.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved foil because of the challenge of it. I had to fence to beat my opponent, and I had to fence in a manner that will allow the director to understand my actions.
Okay.
And that it was my right of way.
Cool. How long did you stay with that first instructor?
Tom Howson was my coach for about 10 years, I guess.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we did the 1993 Nationals here in Fort Myers. I was the organizer for it.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, each division was responsible for putting on the national championships. That's changed now. The national office now has taken the responsibility. But that would have been the last year that Tom was actually coaching here. And he eventually went back to England.
Okay.
So, yeah, Tom coached some good people, too. He was a good coach. We've had a lot of our fencers go on to college and fence in NCAA.
Okay.
And we've had, Terry made the team. We had one of our girls, was on a world championship team. She was very highly ranked. One of our boys was very highly ranked in the U.S. and fenced internationally. And so, as a matter of fact, one of my guys, this is a really funny story.
Okay.
If I'm going over on time, just tell me. Because I can talk about fencing all night. One of my fencers was a doctor here in town, Dr. Myers. And him and his daughter came and they wanted to learn to fence. And so they started fencing with me. And she kind of lost interest in it and wanted to do volleyball with her friends, which is understandable, teenage girl.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Myers wanted to keep doing it. And so he eventually really got into saber. And he fell in with our saber group. And he was fencing a lot of saber and he was doing a lot of competition. He was doing a lot of North American Cups. Which are, I think there's about 4 or 5 of them a year, and they're in different parts of the country. And he was traveling to those and doing quite well. And I would go with him sometimes and coach. And he did a couple of Pan American Games. We did one in Puerto Rico. We did one in the Virgin Islands. And he medaled in both of those. And then he decided he was going to retire from his practice. And he decided that he wanted to go back to college and study, of all things, medieval literature. So he decides he wants to go to the University of Edinburgh. So he goes over to the University of Edinburgh, and he is, at age 65, he made the University of Edinburgh fencing team.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So I
cool.
said, wow, at age 65, that was amazing.
That's cool.
So yeah, and then on top of that, he got to fence. He's been fencing he's still in Scotland. I keep telling him, "You're not coming home at all, are you?" Probably not. But he's been fencing all over Europe. And the beauty of being in Europe is you can be within an hour or 2 hours, you can be in another country and fencing a whole different group of people.
Yeah.
So the experience for a fencer is just tremendous. I mean, you get all this new things, new thoughts, new ways of looking at things, watching other coaches. And the finale of all that is he is now the saber coach at the University of Edinburgh.
Nice. That's cool.
I thought that was pretty cool. So even at age 65, there's still hope.
Yeah. So talking of coaching, so what led you down the teaching and the coaching path? Where was the interest in that?
I never wanted to be a coach.
I've heard that a lot from people.
It's hard. Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah.
You know, you go to a tournament and these kids, it's the same thing in any martial art, whether it's European or Asian martial arts. You're the coach and you're standing there and the kid or your pupil is looking to you for advice on their break. And the worst thing you can do is give them the wrong advice. So you have to be very careful about your thought and you have to be really watching every action that they're doing. And more importantly, what their opponent's doing. So yeah, it's very high pressure. And so it was not something I wanted to do, but our coach went back, like I said, in 95, our coach went back to England.
Okay.
Nobody else wanted to do it.
Okay.
And without a coach, you don't have a club anymore. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And I've been doing it ever since, and I don't regret it. I mean, I've traveled all over the United States, and I've got to go to Korea and other countries and do things, and so it's been great. It's been a good experience.
That's good.
I wouldn't have traded it for anything. When it was first came that I was going to be coach, I was not a happy camper.
Were the students happy, though?
Well, yeah, they are, because there's actually kind of two styles of coaching.
Okay.
There's the do it my way or it's the highway, or there's do it and kind of work towards developing your own style. And that's the way I coach. Nice. And that's the way I've had good friends who were coaches. Matt Garrett, who passed away some years ago, he was the head coach at the University of Pennsylvania, not at UP. He was the head coach at Penn State. And before that, he'd been the head coach at the University of Illinois. And he was just a great guy. And he told me one time, let them develop their own style. And I've always tried to do that because I've seen coaches who everything is done, all of his students do the same actions. You can look at them and you can tell that's such and such a student without even him being there. And so your fencers are going to know pretty well how to fence every one of them because they all do the same thing. And if you allow your fencer to sort of develop their own style of doing things, you don't have cookie cutter fencers, and every one of yours when they get on the strip is going to be different. So there's no pattern. And that's one thing you don't want in fencing or any martial art is patterns.
Makes sense.
Those are really easy to get around.
Yeah. Think back then to 1995. You took over as coach to now. You're still coaching. You're still teaching. Over all those years, what do you think has changed about your teaching style over that time?
Patience. I've become more patient.
Okay.
You know, right now I'm not as active as I was because I'm 74 and I have other people who are coaching now at the club. And I mostly do private lessons, one-on-ones. And that's really where they get, I think, the private lessons are really, if you're going to do competition, you really need to do private lessons. Yeah, the coach can really focus on what you need, where your strong points are, what your weak points are that you really need to work on. And what was the question?
just what has changed about your teaching style over the years?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've become a lot more patient, like I said. And fencing is one of those sports, and I'm sure karate is the same thing, that any martial art. You're continually learning.
Yes.
And every time I'd go to a tournament, I'd see other coaches, and maybe they had a little different style, a little different way of doing things, and I would pick up things. And so, you know, my actual philosophy has not changed, but the way I do things has changed over the years.
Okay.
Based on the fact that I'm continually trying to learn, trying to improve. If I improve, I can improve my fencer.
Nice. So how did you get involved with the para fencing? Did you have para students initially, or how did that come about?
No, that was just right out of the blue. Terry had been to a camp. I think it was a vet's camp. She's a Army vet, and she'd been to this camp, and they had fencing there, and she'd done a bit of fencing there, and she really liked it. And they'd had other sports for them to do too, but she really took to the fencing. And when she got back here in Fort Myers, she called me out of the blue, and she said, "I really want to learn to fence." And I said, "Well, you can get in our beginner's class." And I gave her the dates and times, and she said, "Well, there's only one problem." And I'm like, "Okay, what's that?" "I'm in a wheelchair." And I'm like, "Oh God." And I told her, I said, "I've never coached a para-fencer, but I've seen it, and I have a pretty good idea of how it's done. So, you and I'll learn it together." So we did.
And it worked.
And when she got on the U.S. team, there's another coach. There's the team coach. And so she went with Mickey a lot. And he helped her, and I helped her. And Dr. Myers, who was still here in Fort Myers then, he helped her with the saber. And I worked with her on FA and foil. But yeah, it was like I had seen it before at, they do it at nationals. And I'd seen it, but I'd never coached anybody. So I was as surprised as she was when she made the U.S. team.
Now, has that led to more para students or just Terry?
Just Terry. Well, okay. And Terry's retired now. She was 65 when she made the team.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's something else.
Yeah. That's really cool.
We've had some good veterans fencers as well as teenagers and stuff. And our fencers, the fencers at our club, and I can't take credit for all of them. We've had other coaches that are helping too. The club's always produced pretty good fencers. Even at national championships, we would always just about always finish in the top third or top 25%.
So if someone's thinking about getting involved in it or getting their kids involved, what's the youngest you would recommend? Like, don't start before this age or something? Or
I would not start them before 8.
8, okay.
There are coaches who'll start them younger, but then I've tried that, and all you're doing is babysitting.
Yeah.
You got a 5-year-old in there with a group of 8-year-olds, 7 and 8-year-olds, and you spend most of your time chasing the 5-year-old around. So, I would recommend 8. For one thing, their attention span by then has started to develop. Their coordination's much better. And you start off with a little kid by giving them short activities, short drills, and then you do something fun, like play a game that's related to fencing, and then you move into another drill for a little bit. They have to be short because at 8, their attention span's not that long.
Yeah.
And then I think some are. I mean, there are some 8-year-old geniuses running around out there I've seen.
That is true.
But, you generally try to keep the drills short and not too complicated, and then you break those up with games for them to play and stuff. That keeps them interested all the time.
Yeah, that's one thing. Even in martial arts too, I've had that conversation that I know when I got involved in it back in '84, when I first started martial arts at the age of 10, they didn't do games in class back then. At least not that I remember. I don't ever remember doing games, and now it seems that's almost any martial arts school that teaches kids, you have to. You have to keep their attention. And
yeah, I think one of our problems today is we're competing against video games.
Yeah.
That's the thing I run into all the time is, the kid's not focused on stripper. He's not focused on his footwork. We do group footwork, and, the kid's something's not right. He's not paying attention. And you go, "What are you thinking about?" I got to do video game. I can't wait to get home to play it. So,
yeah, I get that.
They're the same of my existence as video games.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Earlier you mentioned your philosophy. So what, over all these years, is there one philosophy that's at the top of your list? Is there a couple that you stick to? What are some important philosophies for you?
Well, it's basically every individual is just that, an individual. And you have to teach them that way. What works for one may not work for another. That's why the private lessons are a really good thing for kids in any martial art, because you can focus on what that kid can accomplish, and you keep them engaged by doing that. So it's, I treat each one as an individual, and I try not to. My other philosophy is I don't care what age they are, never talk down to them. They know it. Even an 8-year-old knows when you're talking down to them. So, try to keep them engaged and treat them as an individual and treat them with respect.
Nice. I know you mentioned at the beginning that how you think it can benefit other martial arts and stuff. Do you get a lot of students over the years that had other martial arts backgrounds that also came into fencing to, add that into their arsenal?
Yes, occasionally we get some. And sometimes we have, like one of my fencers, Alex Geyser, who's now a really well-known magician. He's in his 40s now. He still keeps in touch with me and everything. He was a great kid, great adult. He got into Jeet Kune Do.
Okay.
From fencing. And he's who introduced me to the fact that Bruce Lee got a lot of his style from fencing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. So yeah, he still fenced for a long time until he got out of high school.
Okay.
But yeah. So yeah, I lost one sort of.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually more interested in the karate than he was in the fencing after he got into it. Yeah.
Do you think that fencing's easier to pick up for someone who has a martial arts background, like maybe like an adult or something like that? Or do you think it's harder to break some of those habits that they have?
I'm thinking back to when I first started fencing and I had just come out of doing Kung Fu.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard for me to break the habit of trying to use that backhand to block.
Yep.
Every time they would lunge at me with their blade, my backhand would come up and I would try to do a block to take that blade away. And you can't do that.
Yeah.
You get a penalty card, and the penalty cards go yellow, red, and black. Yellow's a warning.
Okay.
And every time you break a rule after that, it doesn't matter which one, it's a red card. And a red card translates into your opponent gets a point. So you don't want to lose on technicalities. Well, the blades, because they're continually banging against each other, they get little metal shavings on them. And if you grab one, you can get those little metal splinters in your fingers, and they're very uncomfortable.
Okay. So overall, your 40 years career doing this, is there any type of injuries? Do you have like a worst fencing or martial arts type injury that you've had?
I haven't had much in the way of injuries from it. You get bruised. I'm not going to kid you. It's like any martial art, any combat sport, you're going to get bruised.
Mm-hmm. Is there common injuries within it other than bruises?
Probably the most common injuries are knees.
Okay. Really?
Yeah. People sometimes can blow out their knees, especially if they're older. Okay. I've seen some with ankle injuries. I've seen one lady who had snapped her Achilles tendon. That was probably because she didn't do the proper warm-up and stretching before she went out there and tried to fence.
Ouch.
And the worst I've ever had was my old coach wanted me to fence saber with this young kid. Mm-hmm. I think he was about 14 or something, and he was that crap crazy and wild. And he came on guard. The coach said fence, and this kid come out, and he made a really big action and right across my backhand. And that's the only time I've ever been bloodied. He cut me right across the knuckles with that saber.
Wow.
And I told my coach that I ain't doing saber anymore. At least not with this kid. So, yeah, that's the only time I've ever really suffered any kind of serious injury. Like I said, you get bruised. Foil leaves little tiny bruises because it's a lightweight weapon. Yeah. Epee has a stiffer blade and a bigger tip, and you can get some pretty nasty bruises with Epee. Okay. But it's never nothing serious. I mean, when you're fencing, it's like in the martial arts. You get hit, you probably, because your adrenaline's pumping so much, you don't even notice it.
Yeah. Many times. Yeah, I know. I found out we actually have a local, Fargo Moorhead fencing club here over in Fargo, North Dakota. And I've always thought I should go check it out sometime, and I haven't done that, but now I think I might want to do that.
Yeah, try it out. Lee Wedlake, I'm not sure you're familiar with him.
Oh, yeah.
He's pretty known in the martial arts community. He's a good friend of mine.
Yep.
He took fencing for a while.
Yeah, I think Lee's the one who told me about you.
Yeah, he probably was. Yeah, I see Lee. As a matter of fact, Lee and I are having breakfast together tomorrow morning.
Nice.
Yeah, cool. He was in Texas for a while, but then he moved back here to Fort Myers.
Yeah, I'll have to, maybe after my daughter graduates, I'll have to give fencing a try. It could be fun.
It is.
Yeah, I just noticed, I'm looking at their website, and it looks like youngest they do is 9. So yeah, that must be kind of an average thing maybe, because they do one class 9 to 12, they do a 12 plus, they do a 12 to 18, and they do an adult program.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we do too.
Okay, nice.
Fargo, North Dakota.
Yep. Yeah, I'm across the river in Moorhead, Minnesota, but I work in Fargo, and it's literally right next door. My wife
was in Fargo.
Really?
She was, her dad was lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and they were stationed at a SAC base back in the 60s. Yeah, back in the 60s.
Okay. Wow. Nice.
What she remembers most about that is Snert.
Yeah. I've lived up here since 92 minus my 1 year in California. Otherwise, I grew up in a town called Little Falls, Minnesota, right in the middle of the state. I think
Cool.
our local military base was Camp Ripley. Grew up about 2 miles from the childhood home of Charles Lindbergh. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah, I actually went to Charles Lindbergh Elementary School.
Wow.
Yeah.
Lindbergh actually had a home down here on Captiva Island.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah. His wife would come down here on, I don't know how often they stayed here.
Mm-hmm.
And when my father was in the Air Force, my father-in-law, when he was in the Air Force, he actually met Lindbergh.
Nice.
I got a picture of him. We have somewhere of him with Lindbergh.
That's really cool. So now, what are your thoughts on something like MMA? Is that something you're a fan of at all, like the UFC, or not really?
MMA, mixed martial arts?
Yep. Yeah, like the ultimate fighting championship type stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
What I've seen of it, it's pretty brutal. I wouldn't do it.
Okay. Nice.
The one reason why I fence, reason why I love fencing is because I wear a mask and I don't get hit in the face that often.
Well, there you go. So have you ever done any other weapons training other than fencing?
I used to hunt all the time when I was a kid.
Okay.
And I was a pretty good shot. So, just rifles and shotguns, pistols. Yeah. I like to go to the target range and shoot. I like shooting black powder.
Okay.
I've never competed in any of them. I just do it for fun.
Yeah, there was my listeners are probably going to get mad because I can't remember the name, but there's an American Kempo master I met 20 years ago who was also, he used to compete in quick draw events with pistols. Yeah.
There is a group. I had one of my guys who was fencing who was involved in one of those quick draw things.
Nice. That was cool to watch because when I met him, he showed me some videos and that was actually really cool to watch. So
yeah,
kind of fun.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. I wouldn't want to come up against him in a gunfight.
Definitely not. Yeah. Yeah. I'd definitely I'd take my 20 paces and I'd run.
You know the old saying, don't bring a sword to a gunfight.
That is true. Yep, definitely. All right, I have some fun questions we use to kind of wrap up the interview. Now, I know you said you'd never do MMA, but let's just say you decided you were going to. What song would be playing as you're walking into that cage? What's your walk-up song going to be?
Rocky.
Themed to Rocky? Nice.
Yeah, themed to Rocky.
That's a good one. It's a good motivational one. All right, now this one, maybe you'll pick all fencing people. It's kind of up to you, but who are 3, 4, 5 names you'd put on your personal Mount Rushmore of martial arts?
Oh, well, obviously, if I'm going to include all martial arts, Bruce Lee would have to be up there. Mm-hmm. He did fencing and he did, Asian martial arts. Lee Kiefer.
Okay.
She just won gold medal in the Olympics.
Nice.
Marielle Segunis. She won gold medal in saber in 2004 and again in 2008.
Wow.
Terry Hayes, because she's one of mine.
Yep, definitely.
Who else? You notice most of those, with the exception of Bruce, are women.
Yeah, that's actually good,
I would give you odds on our women's team against our men's team any day of the week.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Our women's team in saber and foil have done tremendously well. I mean, and our guys, bronze.
Yeah.
We took a bronze in individual and they took a bronze in team, I think.
Okay.
Did they take bronze this year in team? I think they did. And the women, they took gold in team foil and they took gold in individual foil.
Wow.
And they took a silver. I think we took silver. We took gold, silver, mm-hmm. and one of the Canadian girls took the bronze.
Wow.
I believe that's the way it went.
Okay.
I know Lee Kiefer, she took gold. Nice. But yeah, and it made me happy because all 3 of them were from North America.
That's cool.
In a sport that has been dominated for over 100 years by the Europeans.
Okay.
And so that made me really happy. Fencing in the United States has really improved over the years, and that's because the quality of coaches improved. When Russia fell apart, we got all their coaches.
Nice. So how often is your team competing? Like how often are there tournaments that they go to?
Our veterans compete frequently.
Okay.
And right now we've had a lot of setbacks because of COVID.
Yeah.
COVID set us back. Something else that happened soon. I can't remember what. Oh, hurricanes.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say hurricanes. You're in Florida.
Yeah. We've had hurricane after hurricane, and they're always disruptive. You lose fencers because suddenly mom and dad don't have a house anymore.
Yeah.
And, it's sad. It really is. So it's been really hard to put together a competitive team of young fencers. It really has. Right now, I don't know. We have maybe 2. We have one boy, Jake Harris is his name, and he competes in FA, and he's just started.
Okay.
And Harrison Avard or Alvar, I can't remember his last name. Harrison, anyway. He competes in foil once in a while, but we don't really have any strong competitors right now.
Wow.
Because, it takes a while to build a good, strong competitor, and just been too many interruptions. We just had 2 hurricanes blow by here recently.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then they flooded again out on the beaches.
Mm-hmm.
People who were just finishing rebuilding from Ian got flooded by Helene.
Yeah.
And then they were cleaning up from Helene, and then Milton comes along, and a lot of them got flooded again.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I live up the river off a canal, and my lot is where my house is really high.
Okay.
I'm like on a bluff almost. So, everybody down the street and during Ian, they all got flooded. I didn't get flooded. I was lucky. It almost came into my yard.
Wow.
There was about a 14-foot tidal surge. So you can imagine, you're living in a house with an 8-foot ceiling.
Yeah.
14 foot's a lot of water.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, I live, across from Fargo, North Dakota. We have the Red River going between our 2 cities. And
you guys get flooded out there too.
Yeah, not as often as we used to, but we've had, since I lived up here, we've had some bad ones. I mean, my friend lost his in the flood of '97. My friend lost his house. You could only see his chimney.
Yeah,
so
I remember watching on TV, and there's water everywhere and fires burning.
Yep,
buildings on fire. I'm like, how can that be with all that water?
Yeah, because I remember at one of our martial arts tournaments, my instructor did a fundraiser for the flood victims. Crazy times. How about a favorite martial arts book? Is there some really good books on fencing or other ones you enjoy?
There was one, Matt Garrett, who fenced. I told you he was coach at Penn State and the University of Illinois. He wrote a book, and I would have to say it's probably not the greatest book, but because of my relationship with Mac over the years, I'd have to say that's probably my favorite.
Okay. I'll have to look that one up.
Mama just wrote a book. She just sent me a copy of a book she wrote about Mac's life.
Really?
And I'm looking forward to reading that because he had a very interesting life.
Okay. Well, this one you may not have an answer for. Some of my guests do, some of them don't. But I don't know if you ever got into video games, but do you have a favorite martial arts video game?
I don't know any martial arts video games.
Okay. Like I said, it's about 50-50. Yeah. And I don't know if there's ever been a fencing one that I've seen.
There was one. I think we had a fencing game at one point in time, but I don't think it was very good.
Okay. Yeah, like some of the big ones are like Mortal Kombat, Tekken, Double Dragon, things like that from back in the 90s.
Say probably. I've seen things on Mortal Kombat. I'd say that's probably the one.
Just Googling fencing video games, and it actually lists a few. I mean, I don't know how good they are, but I think some of them just have fencing in them. They're not actually fencing games because it mentions like Assassin's Creed. Like that's not a fencing game, but it must have some sword fighting in it.
The guy owns a sword, and he does one of my fencers that lived, well, as a coach, you inherit kids. Mm-hmm. I've had a number of our fencing kids that ended up living with my wife and I over the years.
Nice.
And one of them, Dennis, he used to play Assassin's Creed all the time. I remember watching him do that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some cool things in that.
How about a favorite martial arts TV show?
Oh, that would have been Kung Fu back in the 70s.
Nice. Okay. A lot of people, that one probably gets picked the most. I think that's kind of everyone's go-to.
Probably not.
Oh, that was a fun one. All right. How about a favorite martial arts movie?
I never watched that many martial arts movies.
Okay.
Although you see a lot of movies that have a lot of martial arts in them nowadays.
Yep.
Trying to think. I can't think of one right offhand, and I know there's a whole bunch of them that I've watched recently because I like those action adventure type.
Yeah, I mean, people pick, obviously Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, The Karate Kid. A lot of people pick John Wick.
I forgot about that one. I would have to say The Karate Kid, the first one.
Nice. That's my pick too. I love that movie.
Yeah, I like that one. The second one was pretty good too. I watched both of those. The second one was pretty good, but I think the first one was the best.
Okay. All right. I have 2 final questions, kind of a combined answer for you just because of your background now. Any movie you've ever seen, a favorite movie fight scene, and a favorite like sword fight or fencing scene in a movie. So 2 separate ones.
Okay. Well, there's actually 2 scenes in the same movie, The Princess Bride.
You're the second person that's picked The Princess Bride. I love it.
Princess Bride had some of the best choreographed swordplay I think I've ever seen.
Yep.
And none of it was speeded up or anything. Some of the old films with Douglas Fairbanks and so forth.
Errol Flynn, yeah.
That stuff was all speeded up. But this and The Princess Bride was all done in right timing, and it was just beautiful swordplay. Nice. And the best scene in that, do you remember the cup scene, the poison cup?
I think so, yeah. I haven't watched it in about 10 years. I need to dig it out and watch it again. Yeah,
Well,
I do
tell
remember that.
all my fencers to watch that, and we'll look at that and watch that poison cup scene very carefully, because it's two cups. One of them has the poison in it, and they're talking back and forth. And when they're not looking, the cups get switched around and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows that you know that he knows that you know, and that's fencing in a nutshell.
Nice.
I make a certain action, and he's going to know what that action is, and he's going to counter that action, and I know what he's going to counter it with, and I'm going to do this, and it's going to be a back and forth play, just like in that scene. Okay. It's an amazing scene.
That is cool. So just in general, I mean, a lot of movies now, from Star Wars to Three Musketeers, a lot of them have sword fights and fencing. Overall, just in general, do they usually do a pretty decent job with choreographing those?
Yeah, they do. They do. It's choreography in the movies has come a long way. Now, of course, they can edit. That's one of their advantages.
Mm-hmm.
I've choreographed stage combat for theater.
Oh, really? Cool.
Actually, I did it. Dennis and I, and the boy that lived with us, we did an opera one time.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny. Quick story. Dennis and I I was called, and they wanted some sword play for this opera down in Naples, Florida.
Okay.
And that's just south of us. And I'm like, okay, I thought, well, it's just going to be a bunch of local people singing opera. And it was going to be Romeo and Juliet was the opera. And I'm like, okay, Dennis and I'll go down there and we'll choreograph some stuff for them. So we went down there, and then it came down to, well, can you actually do the sword play? We'll put you behind this scrim, and we'll shine a light on you, and so you'll be silhouetted, and it'll be like the actual singers are doing the sword play. And I'm like, sure, we can do that. Nice. So we go down for the first dress rehearsal, and we walk in, and there's this poster, and it's got the names of all these people who are going to be performing in the opera.
Mm-hmm.
These were big-time opera stars.
Wow.
So Dennis and I are like, holy moly, man, we're going to have to really, really, really do this, work on this choreography and do it, because you got to do it to the timing of the music and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we got to meet some actually really, really highly respected opera singers, and it was amazing to work with them.
That's kind of cool. Yeah. All three of my kids do theater, so they've all done stage combat type stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's fun.
Yeah.
I have done Romeo and Juliet for the opera, Romeo and Juliet for the ballet.
Okay.
And I have actually done the actual play Romeo and Juliet, the choreography for it. So, that's where else are you going to go?
Yeah, exactly.
You go to your local fencing club.
Yep. That's cool. And hopefully I'll be checking mine out. So we'll see. But cool. Charles, seriously, before I let you go, first of all, this has been so awesome. I seriously enjoyed this. But before I let you go, is there anything anything I forgot to ask you, or anything you want to be sure we get out there before we wrap it up? Just
go across the river and to Fargo and take up fencing, and I swear you'll enjoy it.
Like I said, I'm determined. I think once my daughter graduates and I have a little more free time, next year, I'm going to give that a shot, and at least for sure take the intro class and see what I think.
Yeah, see what you like. Well, I mean, Lee really enjoyed it, and I think he would have still been doing it if he hadn't moved back to Texas.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, if he hadn't moved to Texas. But now that he's back, I think tomorrow morning when I'm having breakfast with him, I'm going to broach the subject.
Okay.
What are you kind of fencing with?
Cool. Well, seriously, sir, I truly appreciate your time. This has been a blast. I've learned so much during this episode, and next time I get to watch it, I'll hopefully understand a little bit more. But
a little more about it. Yeah.
Truly.
I appreciate this opportunity. I really do. I've enjoyed it too. Like cool. I said, I can talk about fencing all day.
That's good. That's good. That makes for a good interview. So, but like I said, I will get the episode. I think your episode is going to come out December 19th. So a little over a month away, and I will be in touch before that comes out and get you the link and start promoting it. But I truly appreciate your time, and it's been a blast.
Oh, great. I look forward to it, and I hope I come off well.
Seriously, you did great, sir. Very, very good job.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.